This is London Weekend Television, your weekend ITV, broadcasting from the South Bank. And now the news from ITN, read by Carol Barnes.
The miners call a 24-hour strike on September the 22nd. The mafia are blamed for the murder of an Italian police chief. And Cha-Cha, London Zoo's giant panda, becomes a reluctant father. Good evening. Mine workers' leaders have called for a 24-hour stoppage on September the 22nd, the day of action called by the TUC to support the health workers. The miners' leader, Mr. Arthur Scargill, said today, if the Coal Board decide to take High Court action to prevent the strike, we shall have a field day. It's a matter for them. I couldn't care less. The Coal Board has made no decision yet on court action, but they've warned that internal disputes have already cost the industry over 750,000 tonnes of coal production since March. The print workers' leader, Mr. Bill Keyes, said today that unions would decide next week whether to halt publication of all national newspapers on the day of action. But the Employment Secretary, Mr. Tebbit, has asked workers planning to support the strike call to consider its effects. The High Court fine imposed on the Fleet Street electricians' leader, Mr. Sean Geraghty, has been secretly paid without his knowledge. It's thought the anonymous person involved is connected with the newspaper industry, but not in Fleet Street. Mr. Geraghty was fined £350 for refusing to obey an injunction stopping Fleet Street electricians from striking in support of health service workers. The Sicilian mafia are posing a mortal challenge to the democratic state in Italy. That's the view of Italy's Prime Minister, Mr. Spadolini, after yesterday's murder in Sicily of one of the country's top policemen. General Della Chiesa and his wife were shot dead in Palermo. They'd been married just 2 months.
The general had been sent to Palermo earlier this year, specifically to deal with the mafia. And he appeared to be making progress. According to the Prime Minister, he'd come up with linking the mafia with big business in Sicily. And he'd also come up with a plan to end their heroin operations. But last night, his efforts ended in violence. His small family car ambushed in the city centre, the vehicle sprayed by over 30 bullets. The general and his wife were shot in the head. He had apparently tried to shield her body from the gunfire. A bodyguard following in an escort car was also hit and is now in a coma. The gunman escaped by car and motorcycle. This morning, the coffins of the general and his wife were placed in the local police station, and there was no hiding the grief and anger of relatives and friends. This afternoon, a funeral mass in Palermo's main church, with the Prime Minister and President among the mourners. In his address, Palermo's Archbishop attacked the mafia as the incarnation of Satan, and the Pope sent a message calling the mafia one of Italy's twin scourges of evil along with terrorism. The coffins draped in the national flag were taken for burial in Milan. Italy's Interior Minister is now in Palermo, heading the murder inquiry.
Egypt has backed important parts of President Reagan's new peace plan for the Middle East. After President Mubarak met the American Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger in Alexandria today, the Egyptian government said they welcomed the positive aspects of the American plan. It calls for a halt to Jewish settlements in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. In Beirut, Lebanese forces are preparing to move back into Israeli-held positions, including the airport.
Beirut Airport marks the front line of the Israeli advance on West Beirut. The evidence of how fierce the fighting was lies everywhere. Damage to planes alone runs into millions of pounds, yet the runways were virtually untouched, enabling Israeli military planes to land. The airport was closed on June the 7th. The control tower has been out of action ever since, and the Israelis want a presence here when it reopens, and to be able to check all passenger lists. Israeli troops are still based at the southern part of the airport, and despite a large withdrawal from the area, their soldiers are still very much in command here. Israel also wants an El Al office here before the soldiers go completely. Lebanon's Middle East Airlines suffered most, losing 5 aircraft. The invasion cost the company about £15 million, but 32 of their staff stayed on throughout. The clearing up operation is already well in hand. If the Israeli withdrawal and the repairs are completed without any further hitches, the airport could reopen within a week. Jeremy Hands, ITN, Beirut Airport.
The Defence Secretary, Mr. John Knott, has said he's ready to leave his cabinet post before he leaves politics. Mr. Knott said earlier this week that he wants to leave Parliament before the next general election. He spoke about his decision for the first time at his farm near Penzance.
Now that I've made my announcement that I wish to retire at the next election from politics, I expect it's quite a good idea that in due course I step down well before the next election so that somebody else can take the Defence Ministry into the election. But for the time being, there's a lot to do in the Ministry of Defence in the next few months.
You've never made any secret of the fact that the Chancellorship was the one job you would have liked. Is there now a sense of perhaps personal disappointment?
Well,